Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Outer Limits of Inner Truth radio show. OuterLimitsRadio.com. I'm your host, Ryan. This is part 4 of our 4-part series on weight loss, and we're going to focus on the metaphysical and spiritual aspects of weight loss. And if you want to hear something ironic, in the course of making this show on weight loss, I think I gained about 5 pounds because I was up most nights editing, eating late at night. So, how ironic, right? I don't know. I just think it's so funny. I don't know. I'm laughing hysterically. It took me about 10 times to record this introduction, so I can't help it. Let us begin tonight's program. Welcoming back to the program is Mr. Jeff Casper and Miss Jona Bryndis, metaphysical teachers, energy healers. You heard them on the program several times before. You can learn more about them by going to their website at transCODES.com. Mr. Casper, Ms. Jona Bryndis, what can you tell us about some of the metaphysical reasons why people retain a substantial amount of weight?
Probably the single most prevalent reason is not really dealing with emotions. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between male and female issues, okay? So we have to look at that. For females, the main reason why they're putting on weight is because they're absorbing too many emotions and they don't really know how to clear them. And the absorption of emotions, and this can be their own, it can also be other people's emotions, is typically in the second chakra area, which is sort of the lower abdominal area, the belly area, so to speak. And so for women, weight loss has a lot to do with the belly. That just part of the reason, part of the collective programming here that a healthy and attractive woman should have a flat belly. But this is not actually possible to have a flat belly if we disregard the emotional absorption that we have. So people can be very thin and have a big belly, which is also part of the reason why there's so much eating disorders, in regards to anorexia and bulimia, because people can be very thin and actually underweight and yet perceive themselves as overweight because all they see is their belly.
My understanding is that a person who is very sensitive may actually manifest weight as a direct result of taking on so many others' emotions and so many others' feelings. I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. I was also wondering what your thoughts were about a culture or society where the people are gaining a substantial amount of weight, yet they are not as sensitive. I was wondering if there's any comparable difference between the two.
Well, there's the psychological or the communicational, the social aspect of being sympathetic or empathetic, and then there's the energetic aspect. So when we absorb emotions, it doesn't really mean that we're dealing with them. In fact, the whole process of absorbing emotions is actually showing that we're not really handling the emotions, so we're not really working with them. So let's say, just to stay with your hypothesis that people are not sympathetic, you see somebody going through something and you don't really want to deal with it, you kind of turn your own emotions off, and yet energetically everything that's coming from the other person, like say the drama or the pain, still arrives in your energy field, and it has to go somewhere. If it doesn't get digested properly, it goes into the lower abdominal area. That's why people who are it's one of the reasons why people who are in the healing arts or in situations where they have, like, say, a lot of customer contact, customer support, why they tend to accumulate belly weight. Mm-hmm. All right, that's one of the reasons. It's because we're not dealing with it. It's because we're not allowing these emotions to be felt. They're just being stored.
Yeah, and eventually that just adds up. It's no different than, a person who plays heavy contact sports or martial arts. when you're younger, you can take hits all day long because you can heal faster, but eventually your body begins to not handle that very well. So then what happens? You start to have injuries, you start to have more issues with trauma, so forth. So it's the emotional, energetic aspect, very similar to a football player who takes hits for 10 years and all of a sudden, 15 years down later, when they retire, now they have Alzheimer's or whatever. It's very similar to that. It's a very good comparison.
So the emotional aspect is probably the number one aspect. There's a lot of other aspects, nutritional aspects, and so forth, that also play into the energetic or energy management aspect of a person. For instance, when, and this is really true for anything in our human existence, when the food that we eat cannot be digested correctly, just like we just talked about emotions, then it doesn't really matter what you eat. It gets stored in your fat reservoirs. And so for a lot of people, the energetic view of weight loss requires them to really shift their entire thinking about food. So what we do is we help people to shift their inner focus away from wanting to lose weight, which is very often accompanied with a lot of pain, with a lot of deprivation, into self-love and self-care, and really shifting the attitude from calorie counting to seeing food as functional and seeing food as nurturing to themselves.
Is there any comparable difference as far as if you're looking at somebody who eats meat and somebody who doesn't eat meat? Is there any difference in terms of the energy that they're going to be consuming? Will that matter if they're eating meat or not eating meat? Does meat have a low density vibration? Will it put them in a lesser state? Will it cause them to gain more weight? I just didn't know if the types of food they eat have different vibrational frequencies, and that would ultimately lead to their well-being and how much weight they have.
It depends upon how the person eats it. Obviously, if a person has a viewpoint, also their feelings on it. If a person feels they need to give up meat because it is a healthier choice, to have less meat in your diet, because it's easier to digest other things, or how you take it in. And the challenge a lot of times is with that is people get into beliefs about it. So if you believe eating meat is bad or you shouldn't do it, you keep eating it, well, that's an emotional aspect. You're going to start to have problems with that. If you eat meat properly and you eat healthy meat, I don't think it's an issue if you know how to, because digesting heavy protein like that takes a different diet component or different diet makeup to make that go through your system more effectively and use it properly. If your choice is a spiritual choice to give up meat and you want to do that, that's healthy as well too. There's ways to do that, but no, I don't think there's really a major difference.
The main point here, I think, is the attitude that we have about it, and what we have observed, and this coincides with what a lot of other energy workers observe, is that as people grow in consciousness, they tend to want to give up eating meat because they don't feel good when they eat too much meat. So looking at it from the other perspective, what happens is if a person begins to vibrate higher, since you brought that in, they can feel better if a specific food group is supporting for them or not. And the phenomena is that most people who actually do spiritual work and vibrational work just don't feel that attracted to meat anymore. Now, the energetic aspect, looking at the meat that we can consume nowadays that is offered to us through grocery stores and so forth, the way the meat industry treats the animals and so forth, does bode for lower vibratory energy in meat, simply because there's a lot of torment, a lot of mistreatment, and fear, and very adverse, without going into the drama of that, very adverse energies that are being stored in the cell memory of these animals. And so when we consume this kind of meat, then we are taking on some of those energies that were stored in the cells, which means that the other side of the observation, people who do not work on their spiritual growth, or who are simply oblivious to how things work within themselves, tend to eat more meat than people who are a bit more aware of it. I'm not talking about the moral, the ethic, or the conscience. That's something that comes to a person as they grow in their consciousness. They begin to actually look at these kind of things, like how was this animal treated? How was this how is the production line? And not just with animal food, also with plant food. It's the same thing. So there is a way to select the foods that provide us with higher vibrational frequencies or resonances than lower ones, and this is where all this development of organic farming and so forth originated, actually, because the food that comes out of an organic production typically has a higher vibration than the commercial production, whether it's meat or plants.
Can a person's current weight, be a direct reflection on unresolved issues and matters from previous life incarnations?
That'd be tough to answer. I mean, it's possible,
Previous life incarnations bleed through into our today's experience and our present experience. So, sorry for interrupting me. It's not the cause. All right, it can add to it. It can be part of how it shows. All right, so if I have, like, say, a unresolved karmic issues, like, say, I was a mass murderer in one of my past lives, and of course that created a lot of guilt, that created a lot of sort of dissonances in my energy field, then it may play out in my present life as carrying all this emotional sort of dead weight with me, which then again plays into these dynamics that we talked about.
If you look at dogs, you observe them. What are two things they love to do? They love to eat nonstop. They will eat nonstop, and they love to be on the couch. And if you look at some of the typical average Americans, what do they love to do? They love to eat nonstop, and they're always on the couch. And I'm wondering, is there any possibility you think that some of the people today, or a majority of people today that are overweight, could be dogs that have reincarnated into the human form to have everything that they did not have when they were dogs?
My view on that is that you're a dog. You're not going to turn it up. But if you look at what you said, it's a very funny question. But dogs they do have some emotional capacity. It's more animalistic in nature. But dogs can definitely feel certain things. They can feel fear. They can be shamed. That kind of stuff in the basic level. So you don't usually see dogs get too fat unless they are too sedentary. But they love to play. So typically when dogs get sedentary is when their owners are sedentary, when they get heavy, when they start to get heavy, it's when their owners are not moving around. But it's one of those things where with dogs, it's usually more so lack of activity or they're absorbing too much, which can also happen.
Yes, in our pet clearing practice, we can observe that. That there is, if they're, talking about weight issues in pets, that this is very often linked to absorbing the owner's emotions, and not just weight issues, of course, other physical issues as well. But see, the question is really good, actually, because there are similarities energetically. The reason why dogs and humans have such a symbiotic or synergetic relationship is because some of our needs are very similar. And we actually recommend people to have a pet if they suffer from anxiety, if they suffer from depression, or unable to lose weight, because the needs that a dog has reminds us on the needs that we have. So if we, like, say, have an issue with weight loss, and we get a dog, we are forced to going out. We are forced to doing things that are good for the dog. And because the things that are good for the dog are the same that are good for us, being out in nature, walking around, being social,
being goofy,
and playing,
Yeah.
It has this positive effect on us, and people start losing weight without even thinking about it. So the problem is always the attitude behind us wanting to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
If it's based on deprivation, if it's based on lack, like I can't have this, then it triggers these parts of us that keep wanting to have more.
Mm-hmm.
Not all dogs like to eat all the time. If you can train your dog to have a little bowl on the side where there's always a little food available, and if a dog is conditioned that way, that it knows that there's always food there,
mm-hmm.
it will not pay that much attention to it. Dogs, of course, have biorhythms just like we do, so they kind of know when it's breakfast time and when it's dinner time. But for the most part, dogs, just like us, can shift their sort of animalistic drive into a more sort of calm and laid back
mm-hmm.
attitude to its food or play or everything as they adapt to when is a good time for this. This is a good time for playing. This is a good time for eating, and they become more calm about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Jeff Casper, Miss Jona Bryndis, energy coaches, energy healers. Learn more about them by going to their website at transcodes.com. Thank you both so much for being with us today. It's fantastic.